everyone and welcome back to my channel, BethChatsBooks. Today's video is going to be my tips and tricks video, the third video in my summer camp application processes videos. Now this is going to be the last one that predominantly focuses on giving you advice and tips throughout the summer application process, but there will be one more video in which I focus a spotlight video on the camp that I went to, Merrywood Camp, which is part of the Easter Seals camp program. So there will be a video in which I talk about some more information on that, but for now I'm just going to get straight into the tips and tricks video. Now before I start going into the individual tips and tricks, I just want to mention two important things that I haven't mentioned in the previous videos that are relevant to your application process. Now the first one is your work permit. Some companies will call it a work visa, some call it a work permit. Now your company, so I went with NiQuest, but if you went with Americamp or a different company, should be in charge of getting you your work visa. They should send you an email a week or two before you go to camp with two attachments, one which will contain your actual visa and the other will contain a fee exemption form, which means that when you go to customs and show that, it means that the Canadian government or the American government can't tax you because you're not getting paid enough money to be taxed. So what's really important is when that email comes through, to print both of them things off and to keep them in your hand luggage ready to show at customs. Now it will make it much easier at the customs desk because these are things they require, and if you don't have this information to hand, then it's going to be extremely difficult getting into the country. Now if you've got to this process and you've been accepted for a camp and you've sent all your information over and you've signed a contract and your company or your camp director has not mentioned once about your work permit, then I suggest that you immediately email either your camp director or your company asking them if your process is on its way, because it does take quite a while for your visa to go through, and the company should have asked for your passport details so that they can privately get on with that. But it's important that you ask them straight away, because if not, and if it's up to you to do your work permit or your work visa, you need to do that as soon as possible because it takes potentially up to 6 weeks. So make sure that you know that your work visa or your work permit is in progress. And then the second thing I want you to know is that most companies, NiQuest especially, but other companies should be doing this, they should be offering you a training day before you officially go to camp. So for me, I stayed in Toronto for a few days, and one of those days I had an excursion day with NiQuest where they gave me a t-shirt and a water bottle and they walked me around the city, ticking off things that I had to do before I went. One of those things was I had to set up a bank account so that when my money goes through, it goes into a Canadian bank account, it's all secure. Oh, the second thing that they made sure that I did was that they would give me information of how to get to the camp. So they gave me special tube coins that I needed to travel through Toronto tubes with. They printed out tickets for me for Via Rail so that I could get a train to the next stop, which my camp director would pick me up from. So they should give you a training day to let you know the next kind of steps. But this leads on to tip number one. Tip number one is make sure you know when you get off the plane your arrangements, your accommodation, where you're going to be staying, and whether you need to pay for this and book this beforehand. Now with NiQuest, they set me up at a hostel for 2 days in Toronto. I had to stay 2 extra days due to the fact that my flight was earlier than they had originally planned for me to be, because I had to book my flight externally. But I had to pay 2 extra days at the hostel of my own money, but they'd set me up and paid for the first 2 days. And they paid for all my kind of transport to get to the camp. So double check, email your company. If you already know, print out all the details and make sure you've got a plan so that when you get off at the airport, you know the steps, whether you need to take a train or a tube, or whether someone's meeting you at the other side. Just make sure that you're aware, because you don't want to get off the plane and have a panic and have no idea what you're doing or where you're going to sleep that night. So that's very important. Tip number two, get flights relatively early. Last year I booked flights from Manchester direct to Toronto, and I got them in early June and they weren't too expensive. However, this year I'm going to have to fly from Gatwick because the Manchester direct flight has increased by a couple of £100. So if you live in the UK, take a little bit of time to compare on comparison websites different UK airports around the day that you need to fly out, and check about whether you can change the price. I would strongly recommend that you get a direct flight because it makes everything a lot easier, but if that can't happen, then don't worry too much. For a single flight out there, it should be in the region between £200 and £300. So if they're charging you £600 for a single flight out there, then something is slightly odd. So what I would say is, in your leisure time and as early as possible, just check on comparison sites, because the earlier you look, the cheaper you will get your flight. Tip number 3, print everything that the company, NiQuest or Americamp or whatever, sends you, and create a folder and keep that in your hand luggage. Now, I printed off every email, acceptance letter, contract, medical information, because when I got to camp, I knew that Barb would expect my medical report to be sent to her office. But just in case, just at customs, if they need any extra information, then you've always got it to hand, and it's going to make it so much more straightforward for you to get through the customs office. So anything that you think might be important, please print off. Things like your travel insurance documents, your contracts, your acceptance letters, things like that. Tip number 4, remember your essentials. Now, I would recommend that you make a week before you go a checklist of all the things that you need, all the essentials, shirts, swimming costumes, shorts, those kind of things. But also maybe the night before, make a last minute checklist of very important things that you need to take with you. Passport being one of them, your boarding pass or your flight detail information, and your travel insurance is another. Now, the company will not provide you with travel insurance, and countries like Canada and America do not have an NHS system, so you have to buy travel insurance to cover yourself while you're out there. It's very important. Make sure you print off those documents and have them to hand, because if anything were to happen, you need to be able to give those details over very fast. Tip number 5, don't put pictures of the children on social media. Now, I know you'll make lots of friendships there and you'll bond very closely with these children, as I did when I went to camp. But the parents have not given you consent, and it's very dangerous to upload pictures of other people's children online. Now, your camp leader, Barb Wazard, should give you a meeting in which they express that you're not to take pictures of these children, put it on social media, and that includes Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all these things that you don't consider, because it will get you into a lot of trouble if you get caught doing it. Also, a side note, when you leave camp, these children will try and add you on social media sites. Once you've left the camp, as your camp director should let you know, you should be allowed to accept them and connect with them on the social media sites. However, I would strongly suggest that if you've had any difficult children, or children that are very attached to you, that you take some time to consider whether to accept them, because they will harass you on social media, they will like all your posts and tag you in things. So just take some time to consider whether you want them on your social media or not, because once you press accept, it's going to be very difficult to get rid of them on your social media. Final tip is, if you're going to travel afterwards, I would strongly recommend that when you go out there, you travel as light as possible, because when you've finished, everything that you've got to carry with you. Now, I travelled for 2 weeks after my camp experience, and I struggled with a massive suitcase up and down tube stairs, and it was a nightmare. So I strongly recommend that if you can pack as light as possible, rucksacks are a very good idea, or a smaller suitcase, something that you can carry lightly while you're travelling would be beneficial. And second of all, linking on to that point, if you are going to travel afterwards, make sure that you budget effectively. In our camp experience, we had 10-day sessions and 2 days off, and that was 3 sessions, and then we had a week session and 2 days off, and then we had a 5-day session. And with those days off, you are allowed to stay at your camp, and just double check with your cabin leaders when you get there whether you're allowed to stay there. We were, but we had to make sure that we found our own food. They would run us into town, the local town, while we was there to pick up essentials to make food with. But most of the time you'll leave the site, you'll go to campsites with friends, or Canadian friends will offer to house you in their holiday homes or whatever. So make sure that while you're away, you're budgeting as effectively as possible. Don't blow all your money on activities and excursions if you know you've got to save a lot of money for the end for travelling. So as soon as you can start budgeting little bits away, try to, because you'll need that money on the other side. And remember, when you're travelling on the other side, accommodation, travelling to the next place, food is all going to add up, and it's all going to cost a lot. So make sure you budget as soon as possible. So they're all the major tips and tricks for this video. I hope this has been useful. Comment down below if there's any other questions or concerns that you would like me to answer, and I'll personally answer them for you. For any of you that's going to a summer camp this summer, I really hope you enjoy it. It's going to be a wicked experience, and I hope you guys stay tuned for my Easter Seals Spotlight video, which is coming very soon. Thank you everyone.